Hello and welcome to the KIMIYA Healing Podcast. Today I'm talking about something that I've actually been wondering recently, which is why do some people heal and other people don't? And I'm talking about trauma. I'm talking about childhood trauma and how that comes through the body and the emotional world, and why some people are able to heal and generate insight and change and heal their bodies, experience safe and loving connections, and leave the past in the past, and why other people aren't. The first thing I'd like to say is we are living in a world that is multidimensional, complex, and where not everything is available to us through our senses. There is much more beneath the sense level. There is a much deeper intelligence. And I've been wondering about how I can best support my clients to get real resolution. And most of the time, by the time clients come to see me, they do. But what I'm really interested in is why some people are out there and they're not getting the resolution they need, and they're actually not healing their past traumas, even though they're trying. So this is the question I've got. Why is it that some people, even when they try, they're just not getting to that deep place of self-acceptance, embodiment, self-love, and the capacity to move forward in life? So this is a bit of a brainstorm, and I'd love to hear what you guys think as well, because I've got my own perceptions and those come from my world and the work that I do. So a lot of what I'm about to say next is based on, of course, my personal experience, but also of supporting people from all types of backgrounds. But I'm really interested in hearing alternative views, because I think that's really important when it comes to this central topic of why some people heal and others don't. So some of the things I've been thinking about, and these have come up when I've been working with my clients, and I can see this quite early on in the process. And the first thing is there's a cognitive psychological understanding about the trauma that's taken place, but the corresponding emotions and the charge in the nervous system still is alive, and it's alive as if the trauma happened just yesterday. So because the emotions haven't been processed, it's very difficult to move forward, because we keep recreating situations that trigger us over and over again and trigger those same emotions and trigger the same charge in our body until we finally face it and release it. So that's the first thing that I've noticed, is people who are doing healing work or inner work at a very mental level, at a very rational, psychological level. And from my experience, that's not deep enough. And we need to start working deeper with the body. And that's where it becomes easier to get resolution. The second thing I'd like to talk about that I've noticed is people leave things unintegrated. So what I've noticed is often people will go on a very deep journey inwards, either in a ceremony, or they'll go through a deep crisis, and then they'll end up turning to therapy, and they'll go to therapy every week for like a year, and then they stop for whatever reason, because they've found some relief usually, or because life has taken over and they've got busy doing other things. So another aspect that I've found is in the difference between people who really, really heal and the people who don't, is this capacity to keep showing up consistently in the healing work with a healing intention every single day for as long as it takes. And it's not easy to do that. Of course, it's easy for me to sit here and say that as a therapist, that we should always be constantly thinking about our self-healing and our growth and our bodies, but people are leading very different, varied, challenging lives that mean it's not always possible to be constantly in a healing space. So that's kind of why I'm making this podcast, because sometimes we find ourselves in spaces which don't allow us to put our healing first, and therefore what do? Do we just drop off the wagon? Do we just say, oh, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it when I get a bonus and then I can pay for it? Oh, I'll do it when summer comes, etc., etc. Do we keep postponing what we need to do because we don't really feel viscerally the urgency? So that's another question that I'm just pondering. So I've also noticed when it comes to the difference between people who heal and people who don't, I'm getting a bit distracted, sorry, because there's this little squirrel and a magpie and they're like jumping around together in the garden, and it's quite funny to watch two species coming together. So another thing, in fact, the squirrel and the magpie, maybe that's a good analogy. The support network. It's really, really important, especially as we are in a culture of one-to-one therapy and one-to-one healing work, which is in some ways beneficial and in other ways not necessarily conducive to the way that human beings are really supposed to integrate. Because we are tribal people, we are inherently connected, we are supposed to be triggered and treasured by each other, and that catalyzes the process. And for those of you who've experienced the womb room journey, you will have recognized that, the power of journeying with other people. So one of the things that I've noticed is that people who are only ever involved in one-to-one healing work, they can often find themselves on a slower track to recovery, because in some ways they're isolated. In some ways, they're actually not getting that deep empathic connection and mirroring from people around them. So what happens there is it's easy to compartmentalize. Okay, I've got this life that I lead, and I've got this kind of identity for 5.5 days a week, and then that other half a day a week where I actually focus on myself, on my healing, I've got a different identity for that, and the two don't really come together. And I know what that feels like, because I was in that world where I was working in the tech world and simultaneously doing lots of healing and plant ceremonies with myself, and in a discovery and finding that I did feel quite isolated when I was doing that, because I was not connected to a world where we were doing it together. I was going back into a world where I couldn't really talk about it. No one was particularly interested, or probably all thought I was a little bit crazy. And that can, although it didn't, for me, take the focus off, it made me even more determined. For some people, it can be either a distraction or it can be isolating. So then it starts to feel, well, I'm doing all of this really deep and sometimes painful work, and everyone else seems cool. Everyone else seems really happy and content with their life. So why should I keep doing this? Because this hurts. And that experience, that perception, can take people away from a place where they can be really, really committed and deeply immersed in their healing work. And I do believe that that's what it takes. It does take a deep immersion for radical change to come about. From my experience anyway, I didn't approach my own healing in a casual way. It was not a casual thing for me. It was not something I just did in my spare time or in the weekend. I made time for it. I actually held it up there as important as my job and the work I was doing, because by that time I had already experienced that my mental health was starting to affect my performance at work, and started to understand that actually if I want to be able to work and I want to be successful and productive, I need to start looking after my mental health as a priority, not an afterthought. So making time and space and healing in context can be really, really supportive. And I've written a blog post about this called Why Healing is Sometimes a Reflection of Cultural Misappropriation, and what the impact is of that. So looks at healing work that has been deconstructed from its context. And one example of that is say plant ceremonies, where people will do a weekend, for example, but then go back to their normal life, and they won't be that necessarily the way that it was done in indigenous tribes, where everything was constructed to support the ceremonial insight and healing and journey, including the food you eat when you finish, including the integration is woven into the experience. So it becomes a way of life, is what I'm trying to say, rather than something that you bolt on to your list of things that you've done. I did my yoga class, I did Vipassana, I did my detox, did my vegan cleanse, and now I'm doing my healing, doing my plant medicine ceremony, for example, and then I go back to being who I am, right? Now, for deep work to take place, like it's an identity shift, it moves the foundations of the identity. And if we don't feel supported and held in a context, it can be very difficult to let our foundations move, because we're trying to hold ourselves together. So this is another thing that I've noticed in people who do heal very rapidly the root causes, is because they're fully immersed. They're taking part in not just in one individual depth work, but also in group journeys where they start to recognize that actually other people have had very, very similar life experiences to them and very similar traumas, and they don't feel so alone. They feel more supported to let their identity be changed, be moved, and therefore they're more comfortable to change and to move. Another thing, which is kind of following on from that point, is about change. And when we are comfortable and when we've started to accept the inherent presence of this ever-changing world, this ever-changing body that we have, this ever-changing mind, when we start to recognize that change is inevitable, we can accept the deeper mysteries of healing work and the deeper edges that we get taken to, because we know it's going to change. We know that. We've tasted it so many times that change starts to feel safe. Sometimes change even starts to feel exciting. However, when we are in a place where we haven't experienced much change, things have always kind of been the same way, and that has created quite a solid identity structure, change can be very threatening. Change can be very unsettling. The people who are able to open up, to embrace change, whether it's because they are at rock bottom and they have to change, like I was, or whether they are really motivated and driven to experience something different and more beautiful and more balanced in their life, which I have encountered people like that, they are more likely to complete the healing work they need to do to get the resolution that they're looking for. When we become afraid of change because we fear what might be taken away from us, we fear what we might, where we might end up. We have all these catastrophe cases. When we find ourselves in that space of fearing change, we can actually resist our own healing. So that's another thing I've noticed in the difference between people who heal and people who don't. People who don't heal the root causes is because there is such a deep fear of things changing for them. And it could be because whenever there has been change, it's always been very unpredictable, violent. It's always been hostile. It's always been frightening. So therefore change inherently means danger and means fear. So that's been programmed in at a very young age. and therefore safety is the paramount experience. So everything has to be kept the same and nothing can be challenged, particularly the identity and the belief systems cannot be challenged. And people like that struggle to resolve the root causes because inherently going to that place will change them. And working to support someone to understand and experience change in a safe way, and just to acknowledge as well that they probably have experienced change that was supportive and that was beneficial and that felt safe to them. Supporting clients to recognize those experiences, to bring them to the forefront of their mind rather than to only be focusing on the past experiences of change that were dangerous and frightening. That can be part of the process of getting a deeper acceptance of change and get into relationship with this notion of change. Like, change is a word until you have lived it. And I've had, I would say, three careers, maybe four, I'd say. So I've retrained, I've gone on a journey, and people will ask me, like, why did you change? Why did you change your careers? How did you do that? And it's because I've always been really excited by growth and by change and by depth and by being personally challenged and personally illuminated. I've always felt like that was right, and therefore I would embrace change as an opportunity. And we can start to embrace change and opportunity and live it. Because I started to live it, I started to get the feedback that, oh, this is actually, my life is getting better and better, and I'm feeling more and more fulfilled in the work I do because I'm evolving, I'm changing, I'm not getting stagnant. And because I lived it, I then had the visceral nervous system response to change, rather than, okay, change is this like concept that I'm wondering about or I'm figuring out in my head. No, I've lived change, and I invite you to start asking yourself how you relate to change and how you live change. How do you live it? What has changed for you in the last 2 years? And how much of that has been conscious, conscious creation, and how much of that has been circumstantial? And just have a little reflection and see what your relationship is with change. And the relationship requires your body to be involved. So, and actually, that's a really nice segue. Is that the word? Segue. It's a really nice segue into my next point, which is your body being involved. The difference between people who heal the root causes and people who don't is the depth of somatic felt sense that they are willing to go into. If we are not willing to feel our bodies, we can only go to a certain depth, and that will inherently be limiting, because most of what we need is not in our mind. Most of what we need is trapped in our nervous system, is in our energy field, and is so much deeper than what we can verbalize or what we can conjure up with our mind. Most of what we need is unconscious to us, and we have to find ways and tools to explore and access our unconscious and our shadow to self-illuminate. So the body is so key and important. The difference between people who do heal the root causes is because they are working with their body. They are working with their structure, with the emotions held in their body. They're working with their organs. They're working at all levels: psychological, emotional, physical, and energetic. And that's really, really important. However they go about doing that is their choice. They might decide to see several different practitioners in order to have a whole rounded experience of healing. I personally work with all of those levels at the same time because I think that's important, and it leads to a very rapid shift in the body, in health, and in identity. So at some point in the journey that you're going on to heal, recognizing that while it's great to be in talking therapy and talking about what you're able to, and having someone there to hold that space for you and be present while you voice and air and get things off your chest, give you space to self-reflect, there is also a real value in working with your structural systems. And when you can combine different methods of healing, you can experience something very, very profound, which is that holistic connection, the way your mind affects your body, the way your body then affects your mind and who you think you are. So that's what I would recommend for people who are looking to heal at depth, who are just feeling like, well, I'm doing loads, but I'm not really getting anywhere. Start working with the body. And it's been amazing for me to realize how few therapies are actually body orientated, truly body orientated. And by that I mean trauma informed body awareness and specific work to release charge from the nervous system. Most therapies will touch on aspects of that if they even go there. So if you're doing, for example, if you're doing talking therapy on a Thursday morning, and once a month you go to a cacao ceremony, and then once a year you do a shamanic journey, and then you do some breath work, you can see how you're touching different aspects, but you may not be truly allowing yourself to get to the root causes of what you're experiencing, to get to the trauma, because you split yourself in so many different directions. It's not to say don't do all of these things to support your healing. I definitely did try loads of things to support my healing, but you will know yourself whether you're going to your talking therapist and talking about the real stuff that needs to be talked about, or whether you are skirting around the edges and leaving going, what was the actual point in that? What was the point in that? You will know, because you will have that feeling inside yourself. And same with ceremonies, same with journeys, same with breath work. If you're going through an experience and you're not actually having an experience or a radically different experience, and your body afterwards is not altered, your state of consciousness is not altered afterwards, it might be during, but then I would ask you to really check in with yourself and ask yourself, is this really supporting my release of trauma from the body? Because it's easy to say, and I get lots of people that come and tell me like, oh, I'm doing everything, I'm doing loads of stuff, but nothing's changing, right? And that can be for a number of different reasons, but it's not what we do, it's how we do it. It's the depth we go to when we do it. You can sit in meditation at certain levels and you can reconfigure your whole physical body, your whole energetic system, just by sitting. Literally just by sitting. No breath work, nothing. And that is valuable because it depends on where you are in your journey, what you're going to seek and what's going to work for you. So exploring, being open-minded is also going to help. So what else? What else are the things that maybe you've noticed that have helped you to heal versus, and actually heal the root causes, versus things that have been maybe more complementary but perhaps a bit of a distraction, or they didn't go as deep as you needed them to go? That's one of the things I'm wondering about. So the question I started with was, why do some people heal and other people don't? And we've talked about so many things, from context, the context you heal in, whether it's just you're only ever doing one-to-one, with the support network you've got around you. Of course, your willingness to go deep into your unconscious, deep into your shadow, into the body, and release and feel your own emotions and your body. Like, that's so important. We've talked about change, like how do we actually relate to and embody change? If it's too terrifying, then healing work that is designed to change us is going to be way too terrifying. So all of these things are are super, super important. And then we also talked about consistency and how we can show up every single day and immerse ourselves in healing until we get to the point where we want to be. Or is it something that we just do sporadically and then expect like a grand result because we just did a weekend retreat and we just thought, oh, well, my life is going to drop into place after this, right? That's what is said on the advert. Well, it doesn't really work like that. We have to be consistent. And another thing I've noticed, which I'll share, is what we do on our own in between the times that we're healing. So this is kind of related to consistency. I've noticed the difference between people who will try a practice and do it every day, and people who will try a practice once, say, oh, I didn't feel anything, doesn't work, or I can't do that, or oh yeah, I did it and I cried and it was just way too overwhelming for me, so I'm not going to do that again, and never support themselves with other practices. They don't have practices to self-regulate. They don't have practices to bring them inside themselves. So they are so overstimulated by the world, which is kind of understandable right now, especially, that it's the only time that they will look inside is during the therapy session. So imagine you've got 1 hour and you've got a lot of work to get done. And for those of you that have worked with me, you will know there is a lot of work to get done, and we do a lot in 1 single hour. And we need to use every single minute of that hour to the best way we can. Now, when we don't have practices in between the sessions, or we have practices but they're not resonating, so we don't do them, or we know what we should be doing, we kind of feel like it does work, but we're getting distracted, we're not focused, we're finding reasons why we shouldn't do it, we're procrastinating, etc., etc. There is a massive difference between people who will do something every single day, regardless of how painful it is and how hard it is for them to do, because they know that this is something they need, it is their medicine, versus someone who will try it out and then drop it and never establish consistent practices to go within themselves. So this is important, because when we do that, when we establish practices that work for us and we do it consistently and it takes us within ourselves, that's how we can empower ourselves every day. Otherwise, there are huge tsunamis out there that will take your entire consciousness, and you will feel like you're riding waves of God knows what, God knows where, because your system is moving so much, because all your attention and energy is directed outwards to that world outside, and you, compared to the world outside, are like a drop in the ocean. Whereas when you are practicing methods and techniques that bring you into the ocean within yourself, suddenly you start to feel empowered. And when you feel empowered, you start to feel like you have choice. And when you have choice, you feel like you can change things. So consider this. If you're listening to this podcast, consider, how can you be more willing to create consistent and self-compassionate practices every single day that support you to heal? Whether it's a physical practice, an energetic practice, whether it's something for your mind, to work with your mind and your self-limiting beliefs, or your mindset. We've all got these layers: mind, body, spirit, soul. And how are we tuning in every single day? When we tune in and we complement that with deep, immersive, holistic healing work, the results will be dramatic. When we go to work, come home, watch the TV, cook some dinner, fall asleep, rinse and repeat, and we don't have practices to bring us into deeper dimensions of life, we forget ourselves. We become forgetful of who we are. And then we start to live more and more in our pain body. We start to live more and more as a drop in the ocean, rather than also the ocean. So I hope that that's been useful and interesting, and maybe it's motivated you to reconsider some of the things that you're doing, or maybe actually you're like, yeah, I'm doing all of those things and I feel really good about that. The other thing that I would say, between the final thing I want to say, and those of you who know me will know I make such a big deal about two things, right? I'll never stop talking about two things, and they are grounding and I forgot what the second one is. They are grounding. No, I've literally just gone completely blank. So there we go. Maybe that's a sign for me to be a little bit more flexible in my own mind when it comes to the two things I preach about. Oh, there we go. I've got it back. Grounding and shadow work. Because these are keys into dimensions that we can only, until we go there, we can only dream about. It's not to punish you. I don't preach about grounding and stillness and shadow work to punish you, right? For those of you who have been on this journey and you've done deep work to reground yourself, to heal your trauma, or to reground deeper, to grow your roots, to access deeper and deeper layers of stillness, and also to illuminate yourself, to find those sub-personalities within you, to go and do that shadow work, to access your distorted needs, to meet yourself where nobody met you, to understand how you're sabotaging yourself and your relationships. When you do this work, those of you who've done it will know you are left feeling like you've just had all of the world's treasure dumped in your lap. It's an immense and amazing feeling. I encourage you to consider weaving these in to whatever practice you're doing to heal, because the difference, and this is the final thing I'm going to say, the difference between the people who heal the root causes versus those who do healing work and don't heal the root causes and their symptoms persist, is the depth of shadow work they are willing to do, and also the depth that they are able to ground. And the two go hand in hand. We cannot ground beneath trauma. Trauma moves. The imprints move. The nervous system moves. We cannot pretend it's not there and say, oh, I'm sitting in the stillness. No, you're not. You cannot deny the movement, and you shouldn't actually deny that movement, because it contains so much energy, so much potential for you to reintegrate into your system. It also contains lessons and wisdom. So we can't be scared of going into imprints that we're finding and movements that we're finding, even though they can be really difficult to feel. They contain so much healing for us. And then we can start to, layer by layer, onion analogy, then we can start to go into deeper and deeper layers and levels of stillness, where we ground and we are still and we are unshakable, and our foundation, our energetic and physical foundation, the root and the womb space, are so anchored and so at one with the earth. Anything can come. Any type of wave and tide can come, but you always feel safe enough that you will make it through. I cannot even describe it. It's a sense of real embodied safety. And especially now, the world that we're living in, which seems to be perpetuating fear and separation, now more than ever, the need to establish a grounding practice every single day. Not just a grounding practice where you go into your garden and throw some shapes and do some ecstatic dance, or like do some Tai Chi. I'm talking about a grounding practice that acts as a mirror for your unresolved trauma and self-limiting beliefs, and that is allowing you deeper access to your emotional currents, to your body sensations, and is revealing insight to you about you. I'm talking about that kind of grounding practice. The grounding practice that is intelligent, not just, here I am, I'm grounding, okay, I feel calm now. For me, that's not a grounding practice. That's a self-soothing practice. And the two are completely different. So I invite you to find whatever works for you. Find a practice that is a clear mirror. And I think you know what I mean by that. The clear mirror is not always an easy mirror to look in, but at least it doesn't lie. And when you are working towards authenticity, towards inner growth, towards spiritual evolution, towards mastery of yourself, towards embodiment of your highest potential, you want a mirror that is clean. So, find your tools, commit to making the space for your own healing. See if you can immerse yourself, deeply immerse yourself. See if you can also recognize the importance of the emotions and the physical body as part of your healing journey, not just your mind and concepts that you're picking up along the way. What is your body holding? You might have loads of spiritual lingo, but if your body is imbalanced, if your hormones are imbalanced, if you are experiencing structural issues consistently in your body, if you are on medication, if you have a chronic illness, you have to find out the root causes of the issue. Doesn't matter how spiritually well-versed you are, there are fundamental unresolved issues in the system that you can heal and feel 1,000,000 times better than how you feel now. And it will take you to that next level of consciousness and support your spiritual development. We can only grow and expand as deeply as we have allowed ourselves to integrate all the levels. That's when we go to our next level. When we have integrated mind, body, spirit, okay, great, we get taken to the next spiral. Mind, body, spirit there, next spiral. So our nervous system and our physical body supports our spiritual development, and our energetic system supports our nervous system. So it's a constant, we're feeding into ourselves at all levels constantly. It's an absolute majesty and miracle of a system. So that's enough of a rant for now. I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this. For those of you that want to come along to the group healing spaces, every single month, a group from around the world, we all get together and we experience a very deep and profound healing. The next one is womb alchemy, and then we have a Halloween special, which I have called Meet the Ancestors. So for those of you who have attended before, it's a very deep field where you will be able to literally feel your ancestral field, and lots of insight usually comes up through that. And finally, the last one of the year is called spinal surgery. And that is my favorite one, because it's one of my favorite things to do. And I'll talk about that in another podcast. But I encourage you, especially if you are a skeptic or you're listening to this and you've never experienced any of my work and you're like, how can it even be possible for my physical body to respond to somebody that's in a completely different continent? You will experience this directly through your body without any shadow of a doubt. I invite you to come along to womb alchemy, come along to spine surgery, and feel it through your own body for yourself. Then you will start to recognize what you yourself are capable of, the level of intelligence, human intelligence that you exist in. And that is a gift. That is a gift that you can give yourself. So welcome, I invite you to come along. You can bring your whole family with you for free. Families join for free so that you can all heal together. Right, so I'll see you guys in the next podcast. Thank you so much for listening, for being here, and yeah, I hope you've liked this. Please let me know what else you've been aware of, things that have helped you heal, and also things that are perhaps distracting you from healing. I'd love to know. So let me know, and see you on the next podcast.